The truth is, most men are terrified of being alone. They can't stand the silence, the stillness. They jump from one relationship to the next, always needing someone to fill the space. Why? Because deep down, they don't want to face themselves. But for those who embrace solitude, something different happens. The distractions fade, the noise quiets down, and for the first time, you see the world for what it is, and you see yourself for what you could be. This is why the longer you stay single, the more powerful you become. Your mind sharpens. Your standards rise. Your time belongs to you. And without even realizing it, you evolve into something others can't control. But make no mistake, this transformation comes with a price. Before we break it down, make sure you support this channel by subscribing and leaving a like. It helps these insights reach the men who need to hear them. And if you're serious about becoming unstoppable, stick around until the end, because I'm about to give you the most controversial insights no one else will tell you. Number 1, you no longer need external validation. While most men spend their lives desperately chasing approval, seeking a woman's validation, bending their identity to fit someone else's expectations, the man who stays single long enough escapes this trap entirely. He no longer wakes up wondering if he's liked enough, noticed enough, or praised enough. He stops trying to prove himself to women, society, or his friends. He becomes untouchable. The moment a man no longer needs a woman's validation, he unlocks a level of power that few ever reach. When he doesn't seek approval, he automatically commands it. When he isn't begging for attention, he becomes the center of it. A man who refuses to bend his standards for a woman's affection is a man who holds all the power in the room. This is why women are drawn to men who don't need them. Because she knows every other man is trying to impress her. But you're the one who doesn't care. And the moment she senses that indifference, it changes everything. She starts wondering why you don't seek her validation. She questions why you're different. She tries to understand what makes you so detached, so in control, so unavailable. And that mystery alone makes her obsessed. Most men will never experience this because they're too busy chasing instead of choosing. They modify their opinions, soften their words, and agree to things they don't believe in, all because they think it will get them the girl. But the man who stays single long enough realizes that he is the prize, not her. He understands that the moment he starts valuing himself more than her opinion, he wins. He stops jumping through hoops to impress her. And suddenly, women start jumping through hoops for him. They call it toxic. They call it arrogant. They call it intimidating. But deep down, they respect it. Because every woman wants a man she can't fully control. A man who is not desperate for her attention. A man who walks away at the first sign of disrespect. And when a man fully embraces this, his entire life changes. He no longer asks for permission to be himself. He no longer explains his standards. He no longer compromises on his values just to keep a woman interested. She either meets his standards or she doesn't belong in his life. When a woman senses this level of self-respect, she starts competing for him, not the other way around. Number 2, you become complete without her. A man who understands his worth never chases a woman's validation because he knows he is already complete. He stops seeking love to fill a void because there is no void left to fill. The world doesn't know how to handle men like this. Society has trained men to worship women instead of building themselves, to lower their voices instead of speaking their truth, to compromise their masculinity instead of owning their nature. But when a man rejects this programming, he becomes a different breed. He sees what most never will. He watches men lose themselves in relationships, weaken themselves to keep a woman happy, sacrifice their dreams to meet a woman's expectations. But the man who stays single long enough doesn't follow that path. He builds himself. He becomes the best version of himself. And that's when he becomes unstoppable. A man who truly embraces his solitude chooses a different path. He chooses himself. He chooses his mission over his emotions, his focus over fleeting attraction. He chooses to build his kingdom before inviting anyone inside. And because of this, he moves differently. He speaks with certainty, not hesitation. He walks with authority, not doubt. He doesn't ask for respect, he commands it. This level of self-assurance scares people. It makes weaker men uncomfortable, women curious, and society angry. Why? Because the world expects men to be weak, emotionally controlled, and dependent. But the longer a man remains single, the stronger he becomes. He begins to see the truth. He realizes that women don't respect men who worship them. They respect men who don't need them. He learns that success doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from pleasing yourself first. Confidence isn't found in seeking approval. It's found in rejecting it entirely. Once he steps into this power, there's no going back. Most men waste years of their lives trying to be liked, trying to be chosen, trying to be good enough for women who don't even bring value to their lives. But the man who walks away from this cycle evolves into something rare, something dangerous. The moment he stops chasing, his entire energy shifts. He no longer speaks like a man who needs permission to exist. He no longer acts like a man afraid of being alone. He no longer moves like a man seeking approval. He operates like a man who is so focused on his own life, mission, and power that nothing and no one can shake him. And that is the ultimate transformation. That is what separates weak men from those who become untouchable. The longer you remain single, the more powerful you become. Every second spent alone is a second spent refining yourself, sharpening your mind, building your empire, and removing every ounce of weakness from your soul. By the time you decide to let someone into your life, you're not choosing out of desperation. You're choosing from a position of power. You're not seeking a relationship to fill a void. You're selecting a woman who has earned her place. And that changes the entire dynamic. That makes you the one in control. And that is why most men will never reach this level of self-mastery. They're too afraid to be alone. They're too addicted to a woman's approval. They're too desperate to be liked instead of feared, needed instead of respected, accepted instead of admired. But the men who embrace solitude, who sharpen themselves in the fire of their own discipline, who refuse to bow to modern relationships designed to weaken them, those are the men who will own the future. Those are the men who will stand at the top while the rest fight for scraps. Number 3, your standards become sharper when a man walks away from the distractions of modern relationships and focuses on himself. Something fundamental changes. His standards evolve. He stops tolerating nonsense, manipulation, and half-hearted efforts from women who believe their presence alone is enough. His patience for games disappears. His ability to see through the facade of modern dating sharpens like a blade. He stops wasting time on women who bring nothing to his life, who expect his attention without earning it, who assume that his energy is something to be casually consumed. The moment a man steps away from the dating scene, his perception of value shifts. He starts demanding more from himself, and in doing so, he demands more from everything around him. His career, friendships, environment, and especially his relationships. He is no longer blinded by lust, desperation, or loneliness. He no longer entertains meaningless conversations, shallow connections, or relationships that exist out of convenience instead of value. His standards sharpen because he sharpens, and suddenly the world starts treating him differently. Women feel it instantly. She can sense when a man has options, discipline, and purpose. She can see the difference between a man who accepts anything just to not be alone and a man who chooses selectively because he knows his worth. In modern dating, where most men are thirsty, desperate, and weak, the man who operates with high standards becomes a rarity, an anomaly, a force she cannot manipulate. But this shift comes at a cost. Not every woman will qualify for him anymore. The ones who rely on their looks alone are disqualified. The ones who play emotional games are exposed. The ones who expect a man to chase them without offering anything in return are ignored. And that's where the real power lies, in the ability to walk away, in the refusal to settle, in the unwavering commitment to never compromise his values for momentary pleasure. Because while most men are chasing validation, lowering their standards just to keep a woman interested, breaking their own rules just to be liked, the man who remains alone long enough to see the truth becomes immune to the traps that keep others stuck. He watches other men sell their dignity for attention, compromise their dreams for a relationship that drains them, sacrifice their peace just to keep a woman happy who never respected them in the first place. And he knows he will never be that man. He understands that attraction isn't built through weakness, it's built through strength. He recognizes that a man who knows he doesn't need a relationship to be fulfilled is the most dangerous kind of man. Because when a woman meets a man who refuses to be manipulated by her emotions, her beauty, or her attention, she fights for his approval. She senses the difference immediately. This man doesn't flinch when she pulls away. He doesn't chase when she tests him. He doesn't react when she tries to provoke him, because he knows one truth that most men ignore. Women respect the man who is willing to walk away. When a man is truly committed to his standards, everything changes. The way he moves, the way he speaks, the way he carries himself. It all commands respect without ever needing to ask for it. His presence alone becomes a force to be reckoned with. A man who refuses to beg for love, entertain low-value behavior, or be part of the weak, approval-seeking masses is a man who stands apart. That's what separates him from the rest. He doesn't complain about modern dating, he rises above it. He doesn't cry about women's expectations, he exceeds them effortlessly. He doesn't whine about the lack of quality in the dating pool. He simply refuses to fish in shallow waters. His life is too valuable. His mission is too important. His time is too sacred to waste on anything or anyone who doesn't align with his vision. And when he does decide to engage with a woman, it's not because he needs to. It's because he chooses to. He selects carefully, deliberately. He tests as much as he is tested. He doesn't get excited over a woman's looks alone. He wants to know what she brings beyond that. What does she offer besides beauty? What does she contribute beyond her presence? Does she add value or does she only take? Can she support a man on a mission or is she a distraction in disguise? If the answer isn't clear, she is removed, not with anger, not with resentment, but with indifference. Because a man with high standards doesn't argue, he simply moves on. And that alone makes him irresistible. Because when a woman realizes that a man's attention is not easily won, that his validation is not freely given, and that he is not moved by her games, she will do whatever it takes to qualify for him. The longer a man stays single, the more dangerous he becomes. He realizes he never needed what the world told him he did. He doesn't need a relationship to be complete. He doesn't need approval to feel valuable. He doesn't need to settle just because society tells him he should. He builds himself up until he is the prize, until he is the one who decides who gets access to his world, until he is operating on a level so high that only the most exceptional women, even weak men, let their emotions dictate their every move. They fall for manipulation. They break under pressure. They tolerate disrespect. They react instead of deciding. But the man who learns to master himself becomes unshakable. Women test men constantly, not because they want weak men, but because they are wired to filter out those who can't control their own emotions. A woman will push, she will provoke, she will create situations to see if he breaks or remains solid. Most men fail these tests without even realizing what happened. They argue, they beg, they complain. They become weak in front of her. And the moment a man becomes emotionally weak in front of a woman, she loses all respect for him. She may not even know why, but she will feel it. Because a man who cannot control himself is a man who cannot be trusted. This is why emotional strength is the greatest advantage a man can have. It makes him untouchable. When a man can sit in discomfort and not react, when he can be challenged and remain unfazed, when he can face disrespect and simply walk away without explaining himself, he immediately separates himself from 99% of other men. Women are addicted to emotional chaos. They live in an emotional world where feelings change by the second, where words mean one thing today and another tomorrow. And when she meets a man who is immune to this, who remains logical and calculated no matter what she says or does, she cannot help but respect him. A man's ability to control his emotions is directly linked to how powerful he is in every aspect of his life. This is why weak men always lose. They act on impulse. They let their emotions dictate their responses. They let a woman's mood control their state of mind. They lose control of themselves, and in doing so, they lose the respect of everyone around them. The longer a man is single, the more he learns to rely on logic over emotion. He learns to pause before reacting, to analyze before responding, and to think before speaking. And when a man operates at this level, he becomes impossible to manipulate. Living for the future. He invests in himself, not in fleeting pleasures, and uses every moment to move closer to his goals. He develops an unwavering work ethic, a laser-like focus on what truly matters, and a commitment to his own evolution. This is the power of solitude, the clarity, the focus, the drive that comes from choosing yourself and your mission above all else. As he works tirelessly on himself, he becomes more than just a man. He becomes a force of nature. The world begins to notice the shift. People can feel the energy of someone who has a singular purpose, a man whose every action is aligned with his goals. He is the man who walks into a room and commands attention without even trying. He speaks with purpose, moves with intent, and his presence alone is enough to leave an impression. The man who remains single long enough to master his mind and his focus becomes unstoppable. He doesn't waste time. He doesn't get distracted by the noise. He is relentless, driven and unstoppable in his pursuit of greatness, the key to true power. The longer a man remains single, the more he learns the secret to true power. His ability to control his emotions, sharpen his focus, and remain steadfast in his purpose. He understands that no relationship, no amount of validation, and no external approval can ever define his worth. He defines it himself. This is why the man who chooses solitude for long enough becomes a rare breed. A man who cannot be manipulated, a man who doesn't seek anyone's approval, and a man who commands respect without ever needing to ask for it. Most men will never reach this level of power because they are too attached to comfort, validation, and fleeting emotions. They will always be chasing something outside themselves, always seeking external validation to feel whole. But the man who chooses to be alone, to focus on his growth and to sharpen his mind and body, becomes unstoppable. The man who has this clarity and this strength becomes a leader, a king in his own right. He moves through life with confidence and purpose, knowing that his time is too precious to waste on distractions or people who do not align with his vision. And by the time he reaches the pinnacle of his personal transformation, he looks back and realizes that he has already become everything he ever wanted to be. He is the man who has it all: self-respect, emotional control, unstoppable focus, and an unbreakable foundation. This is the path to true power. And the longer a man stays single, the closer he gets to realizing it. Appearance. He wants a woman who complements his mission, someone who adds value to his life rather than taking away from it. His standards are now higher, not based on superficial qualities, but on deeper traits: resilience, intelligence, ambition, and alignment with his goals. This shift changes the entire dynamic of his relationships. He is no longer desperate for affection or approval. He doesn't need someone to complete him. He is already whole. When he chooses to be with a woman, it is because she enhances his life, not because he needs to feel validated or escape loneliness. Relationships become a choice, an addition to his already fulfilling life, rather than a source of fulfillment. This is when he enters a different type of relationship, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. There is no more chasing, no more compromising, and no more settling for mediocrity. The man who is complete on his own recognizes that relationships should elevate both people involved. His energy attracts those who are on the same level, women who are strong, confident, and independent in their own right. The man who has reached this point no longer fears the loneliness he once feared. He has learned that solitude is not a punishment, but a privilege. He understands that his purpose and mission come first, and he will not compromise that for anyone or anything. Why most men never reach this level? Most men will never experience this transformation because they are too distracted by the noise of the world. They are too focused on fleeting pleasures, the approval of others, and temporary validation. They waste their time in relationships that drain them, hoping to find fulfillment in external sources. They fear the discomfort of solitude, missing out on the opportunity to grow and develop into the best version of themselves. But the man who chooses to stay focused on his mission, who embraces solitude and works relentlessly on himself, becomes a rare breed. A man whose presence commands respect without ever needing to ask for it. He becomes a man who is not swayed by societal pressures or emotional impulses. He is in control of his life, his emotions, and his destiny. When he finally does choose to enter a relationship, it's from a place of strength, not weakness. He chooses with purpose, selecting a partner who will contribute to his journey, not hinder it. He becomes the man who has mastered himself, who has become a leader, and who walks through life with confidence and power. The final transformation. The longer a man remains single, the sharper his focus becomes. He learns that relationships, while valuable, are not the cornerstone of his happiness. He learns that his mission, his growth, and his journey to greatness are what matter most. And once he reaches this realization, his life transforms. He becomes a man who no longer chases after anything. He becomes a man who attracts greatness, who draws opportunities, respect, and admiration without even trying. His energy is magnetic, his focus is unstoppable, and his presence is undeniable. This is the power of self-mastery. This is the power of solitude. This is the power of focus. The man who masters these traits becomes the man who is in control of his life. He becomes the man who is unstoppable. And when the time comes for him to enter a relationship, he does so not because he needs it, but because he wants it. Because it aligns with his mission, and it adds value to his already complete life. That is the ultimate transformation. That is the man who owns his future. That is the man who stands at the top. There's something that modern women can sense immediately, and it's one of the most terrifying things to them. It's the presence of a man who isn't afraid to walk away. They know when they've encountered a man who doesn't need them. That alone makes them fight for his attention harder than any other man. Why? Because most men enter relationships out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of what society says about their life choices. They follow the traditional path, the one they've been taught since childhood. Get married, have kids, and settle down. But the man who has spent years building himself up, refining his mind, and focusing on his empire sees through that illusion. He understands that happiness and purpose should never come from a relationship. He knows that the right woman should add to his life, not become his life. Because of this, he's willing to walk away from anything that doesn't align with his vision. He's willing to say no to women who expect him to compromise his standards. He's willing to remain single for as long as it takes until he meets someone who matches his expectations, not lower himself to fit theirs. This is why a man with true power never settles. He never chases women who don't bring value. He understands that he decides who enters his world, not the other way around. And this is where the dating game flips. Most women are used to men bending over backward to impress them, changing who they are to win them over, spending money, time, and energy to prove their worth. But when a woman meets a man who doesn't play that game, she's confused. She's not used to a man unaffected by her beauty. He evaluates her with the same criteria she's used to applying to men. She starts questioning herself, wondering why he isn't desperate like the others. She begins investing more effort to win him over. For the first time, she meets a man she cannot manipulate, and that's when everything changes. When a man no longer treats relationships as a requirement for happiness, when he no longer believes love validates his existence, when he walks into interactions with women knowing he's the one making the final decision, he immediately sets himself apart from the weak majority. He's not one of those men who will tolerate disrespect just to keep a woman interested, who will change who they are just to avoid being alone. He's a leader, not a follower. A king, not a servant. He dictates the rules. he doesn't follow them. Most men fear losing a woman, but a man who's spent years alone working on himself knows that no woman is more valuable than his own self-respect. He doesn't stay in relationships that drain him. He doesn't tolerate games. He doesn't chase a woman who's unsure about him. He doesn't beg. He doesn't plead. Because of this, he commands a different level of respect. When he walks into a room, he carries himself with confidence, not desperation. He speaks with authority, not hesitation. Every woman around him can feel it. They know he's not like the others. He's a man who would rather be alone than be with the wrong person. And that makes him irresistible. The longer a man remains single, the more clarity he gains about what he truly wants. He no longer sees relationships as his purpose in life. He no longer believes he needs to follow society's timeline or expectations to be considered successful. He defines his own success. He builds his own legacy. When he finally does choose to let a woman into his life, he chooses wisely. He chooses based on value, not desperation. He chooses based on compatibility, not convenience. He chooses a woman who fits into his world, not one who expects him to abandon it to fit into hers. This is where most men fail. They get into relationships and lose their focus, abandoning their mission. They forget who they were before meeting her and lose the very things that made them attractive. But a man who has spent years forging himself into the strongest version of himself doesn't make this mistake. He understands that a relationship should complement his life, not be the center of it. His mission comes first. He knows a woman should bring peace, not chaos, support, not drama, stability, not distraction. And if she doesn't meet those standards, he has no problem walking away. He doesn't waste time trying to change her, convince her, or fix something that was never meant to work. Why? Because he understands one simple truth. There are millions of women, but there is only one of him. His time is rare, his energy is valuable, and his attention is earned, not given freely. Any woman who doesn't recognize this isn't meant for him. Every moment spent chasing, settling, or compromising steals from the man he's meant to become. Every second wasted on distractions, meaningless validation, or relationships that drain him is a second he'll never get back. You weren't born to be average. You weren't meant to be weak. You weren't designed to follow society's path. The longer you stay single, the more powerful you become. Not because you're avoiding relationships, but because you're choosing yourself first. You're building, evolving, and transforming into the kind of man who no longer begs, no longer tolerates mediocrity, and no longer lets the world dictate his worth. That man, he's rare. He's unstoppable. He's the one who commands respect without ever needing to ask for it. If this message resonates with you, don't just sit there, act. Comment below, "I refuse to settle." Subscribe, like this video, and support this channel. By doing so, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping every man out there who needs to hear this truth.